The car engine is the heartbeat. It's the soul of a car. And so you want a reliable one, because a reliable car means you can go 400,000 miles with minimal cost, minimal muss or fuss. An unreliable drivetrain means that it may be scrapped in 2 years, or it might mean every second week you're at the shop getting it serviced or fixed, or you may have to just pour your life savings into it for repairs and maintenance. I'm going to share a list of 5 garbage engines that are so untrustworthy because of their lack in reliability. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. The first trash bag of an engine that you can find is in this little BMW here. This one has garnered a lot of reputation for distrust because it's so untrustworthy, because it's guaranteed to actually fail. Of course, we have this generation starting to get into LED taillights. We have the single exhaust tips there and a very simplistic kind of design, typical BMW style. Yeah, they have great beefy handles and those last, and a small sunroof, which is fine as well. Little fold-away mirrors with the LED strip, that's great. But look, LED angel eyes, the big grille, but look, yes, unfortunately it had to be towed into the dealership because it won't run under its own power. And unfortunately the 3 Series BMWs equipped with the N20, that's right, the turbocharged 4-cylinder engine from approximately 10 years ago, is where you want to stay away from. That N20 engine had a lot of issues related to oil filter housing gaskets leaking. You have valve cover gaskets, timing chains that would blow up catastrophically, coolant leaks, water pumps, you name it. Coolant, oil, can't keep it in there. It's always on the ground in some format. And unfortunately, as a result, you could expect to see out of 100 cars, approximately 260 visits to the dealer for repairs that you really didn't want to incur. With that N20, you would also anticipate close to 10 grand in 10 years, $1,000 a year just for basic maintenance. Now the maintenance itself isn't that much. We're talking a couple, $200-300, but unfortunately when you get hit with a few of those big doozy repairs, that's when it starts bumping up the average. And sadly, the N20 engine is clearly not one that you want. And that's where it belongs. The second one is what we have in front of us here. It's the Defender here by, of course, Land Rover. Of course, they have some great new designs. These are obviously the redesign, and it's much fresher look. For sure, you can get it either 4-door or 2-door setup, and clearly these are designed for utilitarian purposes. A lot of people enjoy driving these off-road because they're designed for that. I mean, look, you have access to the top to grab all of those parcels and packages. Of course, right here you have this off-road wheel access here, so if you're stuck balls deep in the mud right there, you're able to climb on out and grab this so it's not buried underneath the vehicle, it's actually up on the side. Of course, you have some very cool flares here. Interesting little accent there. Look at these beefy looking handles, and look at that theme. Look at, I gotta love that little theme, and it matches the checker plate look on top of the hood here. It's just an overall very interesting looking vehicle all the way around, but unfortunately, they don't come without their problems. As a matter of fact, out of 100 vehicles, you would expect 273, that's right, a whopping 273 to see the dealer unexpectedly for massive failures. Everybody says don't necessarily buy the first year of every new generation. And unfortunately, there's already a recall because of cam housing leaks. Just a devastating turn of events. Could you imagine having to disassemble your engine 3 years later once a warranty just disappears and goes up in smoke? That would be devastating. I'd hate to see that kind of a bill. So it doesn't build confidence in the fact that it'll outlast much else out there, let alone a Kia or a Hyundai. Those vehicles are brutal. This possibly could even top it if you can believe it. And sadly, one of its brothers from the JLR group has suffered some issues as well related to the 5-liter V8 engine that initially started out as a Ford and transitioned to an actual Jaguar drivetrain. You can expect some issues, rear differential oil leaks. Of course, the engine, you had fuel injector problems leaking down. Those direct injectors are big bucks, and the fuel pump as well. So clearly not necessarily the most durable of brands. But I mean, let's face it, a car like this, you sort of put up with some of the nuances because it's clearly worth it. A Defender, not so sure. The next beauty on our list here definitely is one of those that can deceive you. Now, they're great to drive and they're wonderful cars, and honestly, if you get past some of the typical nuances, you could find yourself with a decent car. The problem is there are some reliability issues related to that engine, and because it's turbocharged and it's 4-cylinder and it's Jaguar, the trust just isn't there for long life for a 2-liter turbo 4 by the brand. So unfortunately, we're dealing with this beautiful car by Jaguar. It has these great headlights, as you can see there. And yes, it has this beautiful design here. And yeah, the fold-away mirror is pretty common even for the F-Type. Here you do have this oversized glass roof on top, the little shark's tail there, and you do have this great little wing on the back. It looks beautiful. And this is the XE, as I already mentioned, with the LED taillights. Unfortunately, Jaguar ranges 29 out of 32 in terms of reliability, so it's almost dead last. RepairPal also quotes it as being rated only 2.5 out of 5 star for overall reliability, which means even from a mechanic standpoint and logging thousands of these vehicles and their issues across the nation, they're finding that you're only getting mediocre reliability at best. Some of the issues are related to fuel systems, and that's where it really gets ugly. The fuel rails have been known to leak, drivability issues with that. Of course, there's other issues with the electronics, infotainment, sunroof problems. It isn't the most unreliable vehicle, it's just that it feels a little fragile, and problems that take it down really shouldn't exist, and that's just the way it works. You can expect 229 failures unexpectedly out of 100 vehicles. That's right, almost 2.5 times per vehicle you would expect to go into the dealership and have to dole out your hard-earned dollars. On top of that, you could actually, in a 10-year time frame, if they lasted that long, expect to pay up to about $10,000 or $12,000 in that time just for basic maintenance and the odd repair that pops up in between time. So it's going to be a pricey car to own and operate. Unfortunately, I don't know if durability is logged into that vehicle. And I would say use your own best judgment if you're gonna take a chance on one of these beautiful Jaguar XEs. And the next one on our list is a notorious beast. Yeah, it's a V6 and it's 3.6 liter. And unfortunately, it was from a brand that has notoriously had issues galore. Now, what sort of vehicles can you find this engine in? Well, let's take a look. You find it in vehicles like this, CTS4 by Cadillac, XT6, XT5, SRX4 by Cadillac, and it's a 3.6 liter V6 found under that hood. But the reality is it belonged in way more than just Cadillacs. It was GM product through and through. So any kind of Chevy and GMC products as well, which decided to ante up to get that 3.6 liter V6, may have had a whole plethora of issues. Well, what kind of problems would you have with that engine? Well, water pump failures were a common issue, and of course, if that goes, that cools your engine. Without it, your engine will go poof. As well, we had timing chains where they get loose. If a timing chain gets loose, you could wind up with skipping a cog and of course, catastrophic engine failure. You could also get a camshaft actuator issue. Of course, camshafts operate the timing of your valves. If that's not operating properly, you'll get sluggish performance. Maybe it'll stall or won't run. The key is, of course, sloppy off the go, may not have the breathing up top when you need it, so you'll notice it's a drivability issue. Ignition coils, which are another issue which are attached to your spark plugs, may result in misfires and check engine lights, as well as heavy oil consumption. A lot of these engines just gobbled up the oil. And you could see a lot of that coming out of the tailpipe, whether it's obvious blue emissions or whether it's just that carbon in the pipes, or whether it's just me topping up oil every week, putting an extra extra quart of oil. They used oil like it was going out of style. So that 3.6 liter V6 clearly had some potential, but unfortunately there was way too many issues around that really doesn't inspire confidence. I mean, if you go back a few years, do you remember the 4.3 liter V6 by Chevy GM? That was a workhorse. That had gobs of torque, super reliable, revved out like crazy, and lasted hundreds of thousands of miles. You see them in all these Astra vans all over the place. You definitely don't see a lot of 3.6s lasting the type of miles that you got out of the 4.3. This is clearly not one for the quality books when you're expecting 220 visits per 100 vehicles and an average maintenance cost of about $800 a year, all in if you average out the big repairs. You could put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And next we have this gorgeous, beautiful Mercedes C300 Coupe. It's got the actual 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder engine, makes about 242 horsepower and made it up to a 9-speed auto. What's not to love with it? You actually have the 4MATIC, so it's the all-wheel drive system. Gorgeous headlights on there. Of course, you have that big bold grille with the 3-pointed star. Lots of great accents on the front, beautiful wheels. Of course, we have this wonderful mirror right here as well, and massive glass on top to allow a lot of light into the cabin for these happy passengers right here. Of course, you have little great details there and a set of wonderful exhaust tips that you can find on there. Again, backup camera tucked in behind that 3-pointed star and an LED set of taillights that are gorgeous. The downside is it's the engine in this car. It's called the M274. And again, as I mentioned, it puts out a lot of performance. There's been about 13 recalls related to this vehicle, and about 220 times will 100 vehicles actually make it into the dealership for unexpected repairs. As a matter of fact, we own one of these. We also started developing some front-end noise on our vehicle, and that clearly is something that's well documented on the net. But we're talking about the engine. Will that engine last? I'm not sure. I mean, the engine sounds a little rattly on cold startups. That's pretty typical, but that's not unlike a lot of four-cylinder engines. What is unfortunate is to own one of these in a 10-year time frame is $15,986 if you rotate the A and B rotation, services, as well as unexpected repairs along the way. You're expecting almost $1,500 a year when you spread out the big repairs with the small maintenance bits. But the reason this one doesn't seem to fare so well is recently there's been some alleged class action lawsuits related to hold pistons. In other words, engines catastrophically failing as a result of a piston winding up with a hole in it and then basically shooting oil at the back end, resulting in a huge engine replacement, maybe $15,000, $20,000 just to get that sorted out. And a lot of that has to do with the simple fact that you're saying the EGR system, it also has to do possibly with poor fuel. And if people aren't using the proper grade of fueling in here, it could create a situation of detonation, pre-ignition in other words, which can essentially, it's like taking a ball peen hammer and hammering the piston top to the point where it starts blowing out. And if it blows out, it's gone. So unfortunately, I can't say the M274 is an engine that's going to last 300,000 miles. I don't see it. And unfortunately, I don't have the trust that it will. And with all of that said, right there, check it out. You're gonna love it. That's all of the little tips and the tricks and those things that are gonna help you actually service your vehicle properly or stay on top of the maintenance so it doesn't cost you an arm and three legs later. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.